very much indeed for coming to this very, very special screening of The Moon and the Sledgehammer. Thanks to the Curzon, of course, for keeping this space open for this kind of independent work. It's a very important space at the heart of the city, and I think we underestimate sometimes perhaps how vulnerable these kinds of spaces are. It's very, very important indeed that slots and parts of the week are kept open for things other than first run release, so that we get a sense of the different kinds of stories of the moving image, and this absolutely is one of those events. It's part of Cinema Nation, which was a series, a sequence, a season, if you like, initiated by Verena Stackelberg in collaboration with and under the patronage of Jonas Mekas, who initiated the Strand, looking at different kinds of moving image, different kinds of ways of seeing, and the context and the consequences of that different kind of seeing. And this film today is absolutely part of that lineage, tradition, heritage, and actuality now. So it's great that it's showing as part of the Cinema Nation Strand. And as I said at the beginning, I think it's very, very important this kind of image is celebrated. This kind of moving image, this kind of subject matter, of course, which we'll come on to in the discussion afterwards. Very, very important subject matter given the crisis we face as a civilization at the moment. I think the Page family will tell us a lot about the direction that we might need to take and the values that we might need to rediscover to survive. And hopefully to flourish. So I hope you enjoy all the films today, and look forward to being in conversation with you very shortly. Thank you.
Philip Trevelyan. Thank you. I'm going to start, Philip, if I could, with you. What I'd like to do with this very, very quickly, really, is to open it up to the audience, because it seems to me like this is an absolutely extraordinary and essential film. It feels like a film from the future, actually, from a vision of a kind of necessary future that I think we will find ourselves moving into in many different aspects, and perhaps more relevant now than it was when it was made. But Philip, I wonder if you could tell us couple of primary questions, really. How you came across the family?
The people lived not very far from where I was brought up, and I was introduced to them through a friend who had been to an auction with them, and they'd bought far too many bits and pieces, and they needed a hand with getting it home. And so he was a great friend of mine, and it was my part of the world down there. I was brought up in New Haven for 7 years or 8 years of my life. And so I felt very close to that part of the world, and so I got on with when I went back to the woods with my friend. He said, "You've just got to come along and meet these people. They're special, very special." And I turned out, of course, they were. Yeah.
And how did you actually make the film with them? I mean, how long? What sort of time were you with them for? And did you live there? Did you visit? Did you?
Yes. We had a team which I'd worked with before. The wonderful camera work you'll notice is by Mr. Stanley, Richard Stanley, who's come some ways in here. And that was from, we'd worked together before on another film, so we had a team, more or less. And we used to go to work in a bus. We had an old commer van it was, with a few old, like with a fridge and a cooker in it, that type of thing. And we went and sat in the woods with that and just spent a long time. I think we spent probably the best part of a month there, on and off, and perhaps with days between shooting, rests between shooting. That's how it went.
What the film reveals in lots of ways is an extraordinary psychology among the family members, and there's this sense of a kind of unique space that they've created. It's a real shock at the end when they enter the world of the town and the street. It's as though this world is unimaginable almost when they're in the wood. How did you find that sense of coming from outside into that space? Was it very much in the way that the film suggests, this kind of other parallel world?
It was exciting for me, living in outside in the real world, as it were. But they actually lived in the real world more than I did in some ways, because they did jobs outside, and they had worked. The father, Mr. Page, had worked in aircraft engineering at one point, and threshing contracting. So he was locally known, very well known locally, known as Oily Page, and much loved person, I might say. much loved, and not, in his district. So, what else? What did you say?
No, I think you've answered the question.
Yes.
Absolutely. I mean, what the film shows in a way which is so rare now in contemporary cinema, moving image, whatever we'd like to call it, is this attention to detail and to work. There's a real sense of work unfolding, in the lives of the family that you show, and they're very articulate as well. They have a kind of different kind of knowledge about the way that the world was going then and clearly is going now. Was there very much part of your project, this idea of trying to bring this kind of awareness and attention to what is obviously so often marginalised?
It was, actually. After we'd been it certainly was in mine, and we even, at one point, you know how you try and do impossible things with films, and when you're young you do. We actually shot some film in Dagenham at the Ford Motorworks for a day, thinking that this part of the world could be contrasted, but actually in some ways you can't say do too much in a film. It was material that never got used. So we did try. We were thinking about the contrast between the two worlds. The worlds in which you're quiet and have time to think about things and perhaps become curious about things, like animals and how things are made and how to make a telescope and how to use your imagination, which is what they did so brilliantly. Yeah? That's what we don't do on the whole.
No, there's a real sense of lost skills and a lost understanding, I think, that kind of comes through the film. The film presumably was a very significant kind of threshold for you in terms of what you subsequently did and how you've chosen to lead your life. Is that correct? Or
up to a point, yes. It was important to me. I think I would have changed my career, whatever happened. I found filmmaking quite a nuisance in lots of ways. I like to do things. I liked to do things with my hands, and have done it ever since. But I haven't stopped making films. I've made several films after stopping, as it were.
Thank you. I'm just going to turn to Andrew now, and Andrew, I think you'll certainly recognise the observation that filmmaking is a nuisance with your own current woodland project, perhaps. But could you tell us how you came to the film? First of all, perhaps how you saw it, and then the impact, of course, as it unfolded in your own work.
It's weird. It's almost as if when I saw the film, I felt I'd seen it before somewhere, and I think it was probably on Channel 4. There was Nick Gordon-Smith, the friend, kind of collaborator that made Diddy Koi with me. He talked about this film, and it become a kind of weird kind of pilgrimage to try and find a copy of this film. And so eventually, I think I saw it before it was even broadcast on Channel 4, and it kind of just lived up to this kind of expectation. And I sat in the audience today. I was also thinking, well, it's one of those desert island disc moments where if I could have a luxury, I would take this film with me on a 16mm projector and just keep watching it. I mean, I've watched it so many times, and yet every time I look at it, it kind of transports me somewhere else. It's this kind of contemplative space. It's this love of the kind of landscape. It's just fecund, it's so rich, it's so pregnant with stuff, and each time you look at it, or each time I look at it, I'm just going somewhere else with the film. And I think one of the things, it's just something about the humour of this family that completely blows me away every time. And there's kind of the metaphors, the language, they all seem to be kind of brilliant performers. Mr. Page, Oily Page in particular, always seems to be up for the crack. And they're the kind of things that each time I look at them, each time I kind of process their body language, you know that they're doing this for the camera, and yet at the same time, I'd like to think that this is just what they're like normally. So that would certainly be a question I'd love to ask. Yeah, well,
one of the things that we don't have anymore is travelling circus. And Mr. Page, between his life as an engineer and general countryman, he was a clown in local circus. That's why he knew all this stuff. That's why he was unashamedly unself-conscious, completely free. And, that was because he had done performances in local circuses. I think there's a tiny element of him perhaps was autistic. I don't know, but only a small element. It was a sort of he had done local circus performances. I know that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that seems to be kind of manifest all the way through. I mean, did you kind of encourage them at any point? For instance, when he suddenly gets down on his hands and knees and he's got his gas mask on, he's pretending he's an elephant, and he's already talked to us about the kangaroo being a particularly interesting animal, a good animal, and a monkey being a pain in the arse because you could never leave it. And all this kind of stuff begins, and that's the power of the edit, I think. When you begin to kind of sculpt with the material, did you ask him to dress up like that, or he just went, "Oh, Philip, yeah, look," and then you came out one morning and there he was on hands and knees?
No, he genuinely, he was very interested in showing me how an elephant walked. I think this was an elephant, because he says the knees bend in the wrong ways, he says. And I'll show you. This is what an elephant looks like. I can walk like an elephant.
There was also the other bit. I mean, I don't know why he was painting his face. Was he pretending to be a Red Indian or something at some point when he got bored with oiling a bit of old machinery? And
yes.
Is that because he's old? Is that one of his things? Is a tick?
He's a performer. He was a performer, and was a very strong character, as you've noticed.
Ben, you've clearly taken this project to heart. You've taken Philip's response to the Page family and the kind of concerns of the film forward in your own filmmaking. Could you tell us, again, in this sort of similar way to Andrew, how you came to it? And clearly you've absolutely imbibed from it.
Yeah, I'd started this project of trying to find folk sort of living outside of what we generally think of as society, and I don't know whether it's a sort of looking at a proposed ideal future and whether there's any kind of reality in that for me, so I made this first film about a guy called Jake up in Scotland, and I actually showed that to Andrew, and he told me about the Moon and the Sledgehammer, and reluctantly lent me his videotape of it. And it obviously had a profound effect immediately. I mean, it just it spoke exactly about the kinds of things and people that I was kind of looking for, and trying to I'm interested to know if there are people who are have a different kind of relationship with their surroundings and the landscape and the earth and the kind of contradictions that come with that, because it's not that straightforward. If you go and live in the middle of the wilderness, it doesn't necessarily mean that everything you do is going to be sort of perfect for the environment.
Certainly not. I know that. There are. I've lived a long time now in the country and away from the majority of people, but I'm quite sure of my experience. I'm sure there are people in the country who've got a lot to teach us. The townsfolk, anyway. And when Mr. Page talks about townsfolk, he talks about people that haven't got time. All they do is walk down the street, they come to work, buy a newspaper, sit in the office, and only go home at night. Now, he's pointing out that they haven't got any time to have anything at home, yeah? They've no time to reflect. Country people may have boring, repetitive work to do, but in some ways, they've got an awful lot to teach townsfolk. And I've often thought, as I'm sure you have, that this chap could teach the Prime Minister a great deal. And he's just clipping a sheep beside you or something. I mean, he's got clear, simple feelings and thoughts which are uncomplicated, and quite honestly, they should be listened to sometimes.
Did you never get an urge, Philip, to do the same kind of thing up in Yorkshire? I know that you're living up in the Yorkshire Dales. You've been up there quite a while. And in fact, when I was up there making a film of mine called This Filthy Earth, I was trying very hard to kind of make contact with you then, and ended up, it's the typical machinations of making films. It just prevents you from leading a proper life or normal life. I mean, are there people up there that you maybe stumble across that you meet in the local post office or in the pub? You think, Jesus, I'd like to spend some time with you again.
I spend a lot of time with these people, and they are good company. And
to make a film, I mean.
Oh, to make a film. Yeah. Well, if you make a film too close to your own patch, you might get into trouble. So I don't actually.
Right.
No, I leave that to other people in my district, and other films are made. Mm.
I was actually at film school when I saw Moon and the Sledgehammer the first time, and it was actually a incredibly successful documentary. I think I'm right in saying it played in a cinema by Victoria Station, and for a very long time, and became a sort of cult film. And then I went and saw it, and it was very different from most films. It was not trying to. A lot of films at that time were very didactic, very directly political, or had a very strong, very obvious message. And in a way, this was a film that had a fantastic rhythm, which was very consistent with the way it was shot and edited. And so there was a kind of symmetry and harmony, I think, that was very unusual about the film, that went very much with its particular subject. And at the National Film School at that time, there was a lot of sort of anthropological also films being made. And it was very influential, I think, at the time it came out. And I think in the way in which people tried to make films to actually be with and understand their subjects rather than put a particular message of their own on top of it. I think Philip has had a very big voice, and I'm very pleased that the film is being revived and seen. I think it's a very important film.
I should say something, because this film of mine was made by a lot of people, whereas you, Nick, and Molly make your films more or less single-handed. Is that right? I think you do.
Double-handed.
Double-handed, yes. It's a very different world. And
I've always had a big team of unappreciated people who help and make my films.
Okay.
Can I ask you a question? What's happened to the people? Did you stay in touch with them?
Yes, I've stayed in touch to a certain extent, but not a great. Christmas cards, an occasional visit to the two daughters, Nancy and Kathy, but I lost touch with them. I lost touch with the father, who died quite soon after the film was made. He would be 75 or more when we made the film, and I lost touch. Went to live in the north, went to live in Leeds, and so I didn't keep in touch except by Christmas cards.
But did they? How long could they stay in that forest, or when were they ever moved out into?
In the end,
the world?
I think it was sold, and the money was raised by the sale after the father died. When the estate was, as soon as father died, the money was shared out between them, as always happens with farms, unfortunately, or with pieces of land when there are lots of brothers and sisters.
Did you ever get to see the film kind of on the big screen in the cinema, or did you sit down and did they have to wait for it to come out on television? Did they even have a TV, or did they come out to your place to look at it? How did that work, that very first screening? How did they respond?
There were plans at one point. I haven't mentioned Jimmy Vaughan, who's long since died, unfortunately, but who was a very important part of this film and the promotion and the making of it, raising of the money, and also the huge amount of work that he put into persuading me that it needed a story. And the story, of course, was the family and the difficulties that they had between themselves. That was the linking story through it, some of which I didn't want to put in. But Jimmy had a very strong, powerful character, very good one, which encouraged me to do that. I'm very glad I did.
How did they respond? Did they actually get to see the film as a family, sit down together and watch it at the end?
There were plans to bring them to London and to show it with them in a sort of event like this with the press and so on. And I didn't want that to happen, and I made sure it didn't. Yeah, they saw the film on video, on television. Right. Yeah.
Can I just add something? As you gave me the mic, now I'm power crazy. You see.
Go for it, Molly. Absolutely.
Which is just that I think what's interesting is treating people who are it sails quite close to the wind, doesn't it, in terms of how and I have this in a film I just did in the countryside with people who I suspected an audience watching telly would want to dismiss as nutters, frankly, rather than people who actually held a wisdom. And it required a certain pace which television doesn't really like anymore. And I just think that's an interesting area about presenting people who actually aren't current telly fodder. You know, there is that series where they did The Man Who Ate the Thing on Bodmin Moor. What's that series on the BBC? Wonderland. But, you know, sometimes it can get quite close to a freak show. So that there's a very fine line, I think, about how you present people but respect them and give them a platform rather than look at them, which I think this film is brilliant at.
You can't, you know, if there's sadness in that a part of the subject that you're filming, you must give it space. Otherwise you won't get the sort of triumph, you won't get the joy that's also being filmed. You've got to have the other, you must have the other, yeah.
What I felt the whole time watching the film was that it felt like a celebration of this, bordering on they're not idiot savants, but there's this kind of natural wisdom which the people seem to have.
Hey.
But the whole time when I was watching it, I felt like there was another story underpinning. There was a sort of viciousness in the family, and I thought the children, particularly, there was one daughter who was almost mute, and I wanted to know where was the mother, what actually was going on between the family members. But I was wondering if that was difficult for you to ask while you were there, and whether that was a choice that you made.
No, the mother had died about 3 years before we made the film, and somehow or another I didn't set off to make a film about that aspect of their lives. I was much more interested in what they had to say, what the stories they had to tell, and so on. I had to be persuaded quite hard in order to give it this linking story of the family. We came across them arguing one morning behind a steam engine, and you know, you couldn't help but film that sequence when they were discussing whether it was 16 horsepower or 15 horsepower. Yeah, and brilliantly recorded. And once you've done that, you've suddenly found yourself going further, really, and wanting to know what he thought of Peter, really. And, you know, he says nice things about him, but not on camera, ever. He did say nice things about him occasionally. We should have... You know, it wasn't all hate and misery.
Did the children have children themselves? Did any of the sons of the...
There was a son, at least one other son, Ron, his name was, who lived on a little further away, who had a family, who was actually on the traction engine at the end, and there was his little son sitting on the back. Yeah. So there's, you know, he did get married. I think that was the problem. If you live too closely to your family when you're in your 40s, and an egotistical old father like that, it must be quite tough. I mean, I'm sure my children, wisest, keep well away.
I found that the film contained an extraordinary amount of poesis, and that there was a very strong literary strand. But I was going to ask about the invisible mother, because the most enigmatic elements of the film were the daughters. Both had, I think, you know, dreams, certainly, of escaping it. There were these very strong symbolic elements, like the insects caught in the creosote oil, and her holding onto the dove, but captivating it, not letting it fly. I mean, did you see those sort of poetical, symbolic moments?
No, we knew what we were filming, I think, when we filmed it, because she was holding the dove and playing with doves, you know, before we filmed them, and then we set up her to do that, especially for us in the right light. We had wonderful light. It was a very sunny time, and it was very easy lots of wonderful weeks of good weather. As I remember. What was the other thing you said?
The way that they portrayed themselves so naturally and with very little vanity, and especially the girl with the dove. The portrayal was extraordinary, and I just wondered how they related to a camera.
I remember talking to Mr. Page, the father, and asking him about his wife, and he described her. He said that she was a lovely person, and they all missed her a great deal. But she let the children go completely wild. And he said he tried to correct her, you know, and to correct the children. He said he tried to keep on top of it. But she was a very strong, much-loved character, and whatever she said obviously had an important effect on the children. They were left to go to be free. So that was interesting, I thought. He felt as though he had never managed to discipline them in quite the same way that he would have liked. Yeah.
Did the girls ever marry? Or leave? I'm just curious.
Yeah, the eldest one had been away and come back. She'd had an unhappy affair with a local man who left her a great big house, actually. And then she gave it to the council in return for another house, a smaller one. It happened later. But no, she hadn't. There were love affairs. But I think the love affairs were inside the wood as well, you know.
Thank you. There was a question there, and then the gentleman.
I was interested in how curious the family were about the process of filmmaking and how interested and curious they were about your reasons for making the film.
They were suspicious, and you know, they were quite right to be so, really. But the old man wasn't. He was quite happy to perform, and he was a performer by nature, but I think the others were a bit worried by us. But I was sincere, absolutely sincere, in admiring everything that they did, their turning, their blacksmithing, their piano playing. I loved all of that, and all the things, their steam engines. I always loved engines and engineering. I admired them, so it was I didn't have to apologise really for being there.
But also, did they have any conception of what you were trying to communicate to the world?
Probably not, but I don't. Probably not. So, no, not in a broad sense. I quite understand what you're getting at. The films nowadays are very often films in which the filmmaker becomes a part of the film. In fact, Graham is here from Amber Films, and there they've made a film recently called The Pursuit of Happiness. Did you see it? Anybody see it? Well, this was made by my friend Murray Martin, who died in the middle of the making of it. And it was a film about horses. It was about the people who raced horses that he loved so much. In the middle of the film, he died, and so the film had to be finished. And the film ended up being a film about the filmmaker himself. And if you've got a chance to see it, I should make a great deal of effort to see it. It's called The Pursuit of Happiness. Do you understand what I'm saying? Am I clear? It's just that sometimes a film... our film was made of these people, yes? It didn't include me. It was in the old-fashioned way of making things, and not necessarily the best way. I think the new way of including the filmmaker in the subject matter of the film is very, very important, and I think it's the way forward, really. I think it's because it's the way film should go. It's the next film I make is going to be like that.
Could I just add, sorry, I'm hogging the mic slightly, but Molly Deneen touched on it before about the kind of standards of that TV now imposes on documentaries and things. Do you think if it was put on TV now, they'd have forced narration on you? Or forced you to put some narration into the film?
Onto this film? I don't think so. I don't think so. No, I once made a film which was an hour without a single word in it. So that was on Channel 4. It was a musical film. Not a very good one, but it was on for an hour without words.
I got the feeling that there's almost an incestual relationship between Jim and Kath. There's the rose scene, which is framed really beautifully, I think. After he sings his little poem, he looks at the camera and sort of like realises he might have been a bit naughty. Did you get any more sort of like hints of that throughout the film?
We did. We knew what we were doing. He knew as well that if he went on to the next line, which would even more suggestive, it would have been too much, and he's quite right, probably. So he didn't want to put any more down on film. He knew what was happening. But, you know, we were recording a relationship which was very close, and they were brothers and sisters, and it was theirs, not mine. I think, don't you? They loved it being the attention. Yes, the people they liked the attention, but all of them said to me there was a nasty bit that Dad, left in about Dad, so they didn't like that.
I come from Chiddingly, which is the village that the Pages live in, and Philip very kindly allowed us to run the Moon and the Sledgehammer twice at the Chiddingly Festival. And the wonderful thing was how well it goes down, how well it plays on the home team. After the first performance, we were in the pub, and there was a guy there from London. He said, but it was poking fun of these people. And somebody from Chiddingly said, no, it wasn't. What we were enjoying was them laughing at us. And I thought that was a very succinct and a very well-observed thing. It chimes very much with what Molly Deneen was saying a minute ago. And really, I just wanted to say thank you to Philip for recording something which will never, ever be seen again, and it's part of our local history. And nobody really at the time recognised that, 30, 40 years on, it's gone, and it will never be again. And we're just, me personally and many people in Chiddingly are terribly thrilled to have that record. Thank you.
And I was reminded, as I was watching it, of other films which have featured work. For instance, the East German brothers, the Böttcher brothers, very industrial films, shunting wagons and moving a blast furnace, rather different rhythms. And I wondered how you were conscious of orchestrating and timing the shots with the timing and the intervals of work.
Well, I think there are lots of links in the film, which are just sound links, aren't they? And they're laid over images where there's, the sound arrives before you come to the image, and you get a collision of sounds. I note, Ben's films here, they seem to use entirely sound over images which are so it's wild sound always. He's always using wild sound. He never uses sync sound, I don't think, do you? And the sync sound, the picture of the man talking on a telephone or something in one of his films I've seen, and they've laid the sound of a previous interview over it, and it works far better than sync sound in some ways. And you see the person talking, you see him walking around talking, you hear what he's thinking, as it were, from a previous episode. It's much better. So does that answer anything?
Yeah, I was just thinking about the actual composition of the montage of the film and the sense of duration and how long a piece of work spins out and how long our attention to a shot spins out.
I don't know what to say quite. I mean, I've an editor here who helped me and was vital, and he had his ideas and I had mine, and we worked it out together.
It's instinctive
rather than... Yes, yeah, I would say it's instinctive, yes, how long you leave things on. I personally don't consider myself a very good director or anything, but I'm reasonably good at sort of timing and editing, putting things together.
I have known this film for what seems to me, especially today, seeing it again, an amazingly long time, because I first saw it at the Berlin Festival in 1972, when it came completely out of the blue. One had no idea what it was, but I just happened to have run into Philip before, and I thought, this seems like an interesting young man, I'll go and see his film. And I was completely bowled over by it. I was very struck today by its Englishness, particularly by its likeness in many ways to the films of Humphrey Jennings. The same feeling for the fabric of England, this almost forgotten element in English life. And also, curiously, it seems like Jennings, to have lots of links with surrealism. And it's the kind of Englishness which Jennings was fascinated by, but also many visual artists, like Eric Trevelyan, for instance. And I was wondering whether, Philip, you had were familiar with Jennings. Had you any idea of a continuity, or is it entirely accidental?
No, I think I knew Jennings and his lovely films about Britain. I can't remember the names. Timothy was one of them, wasn't it? Something Timothy and the... Oh, gosh, Listen to Britain.
Listen to Britain.
I knew both those films. They're great films. Wonderful films. And my father, of course, knew him. He was a very big friend of Humphrey Jennings and surrealism. So I was privileged to get an eye on understand a little bit about surrealism, and I've always been interested by it, and by artists and the way artists think. I think that Mr. Page was an artist of some sort. He had fantastic way of sort of communicating with us, a great wit, and a surrealist one, you could say, just as Max Ernst or perhaps Humphrey Jennings or my father, who was an artist.
In the introduction you were talking of this renewed relevance of this film. It was made at the end of the coal age, you could say, and now as we approach the end of the oil age, perhaps the time has come for this sort of film. We talked about ecological awareness, we talked about having to make do with resources. The Pages were experts at that, being at the end of a tradition of having to make do with virtually nothing. Now we're going to have to go back to that. I wonder if Mr. Trevelyan has anything to say on that.
Well, I think the first thing I'd say is I'd advise the Prime Minister to give everybody a day off work, compulsorily, right? Maybe it's going to be forced on us anyway. But during that time of voluntary redundancy, or whatever it's called, I think they should use that time to volunteer and organise themselves to work on the land or prepare us for the transition into another way of living where we don't use so much energy. We're going to we have to do it, and I think probably the only way to do it is to slow down a bit, to slow down for at least 2 days a week. Perhaps instead of coming to work 5 days, come in 2 days a week, 3 days a week, and the other 2 spend on the land, or spend it organising ways of changing the way in which we live.
Yeah, my point was, of course, that Mr. Page was an extraordinarily skilled craftsman. The hook he made in front of our eyes.
Yes.
I mean, it takes your breath away.
Yeah.
Those skills are dying out. They really are. I mean, the people who can do that are now in their 70s and 80s, and there's nobody to replace them. And when oil and things become very expensive, somebody's going to have to be able to do that.
And I wanted to ask the other 2 directors, either one, what kind of influence do you think this film has had since it came out?
I mean, I've always found the film incredibly elemental as well. There's a sensuality to it. There are loads of implied narratives about it. I think the way in which the camera seems to be very, very concentrated and fixated on the kind of the detail, and then you'll pull wide a little bit, and then you'll go back into something completely unexpected, and there's just something. There's like a sensuality, and there's rhythms that seem to be inherent in this piece of work. And I think it is the power of a good piece of work that just starts permeating your psyche, and as filmmakers or as thinkers. I've just finished a film in France, and on sets, I must have screened this film about 3 times to people that didn't even speak English, and it kind of, without exception, went down incredibly well. And to this day, I've now I'm buying DVDs and sending them back to France to people that really, really care about this kind of way of filmmaking. And you never know the ramifications. You're never really aware of how much a piece of work can travel and how it can affect people. And as I said earlier, it felt to me when I saw the film as if I'd seen it already. And maybe that was because of my fascination with the folkloric and sort of like the Gypsy Film Festival in Star in the World. When I was there, it was just, I was only there for a day, but whilst I was wandering around with the camera and a little DAT recorder, it kind of, I kept... I was just very, very aware of the Moon and the Sledgehammer whilst I was doing it. and it will continue to stay with me.
I can only say that I hope lots of people have seen it and that lots of people will see it more now there's a DVD. I mean, for me, it was just I'd already sort of embarked on a journey, and seeing it just gave me some courage to spend. I think it was a lot about the time. The time thing was really important for me. You know, spending time with people who relate to time in a different way. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you all very much indeed. Thanks to Nick, to Molly, to Andrew, to Ben. Very special thanks, of course, to Katie McMillan, who's made the DVD release possible and therefore made this event possible. As both Nick and Philip said, there are many teams behind all aspects of film production. That goes for the Curzon cinema, it goes for the filmmaking itself, and it goes for all the steps in the chain between. And I think what this film shows, and the way the film has travelled over nearly 40 years, is that those links in the chain must not be broken, whether we're makers, receivers, audiences, distributors, exhibitors. It's crucial to keep these chains of communication open to provide another way of seeing. So I'm very pleased to have been a small part of that this afternoon, as we all have been. But please do now join me in thanking very much indeed for making an extraordinary film that continues to speak to us, Philip Trevelyan.